Sports Source is brought to you by Fast Frame, with exciting Vol sports prints now available.
This is the Sports Source, presented by Bill Hotz and Associates, and by Renewal by Andersen, with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source, presented today by Bill Hotz and Associates. Well, Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt. They had a bowl opportunity on the line. They flubbed that. They lost their sixth game of the year by 25 points or more. Kind of puts a damper on the award presentation for Coach of the Year for Jeremy Pruitt. I guess that's why they give that out in Week 12, not Week 10. We'll be discussing this. What can you take away from this season? How much can you judge somebody in the first year? We got a lot to go, including something from you. I didn't anticipate it in year one, but Twitter was hot enough last night that we're doing our first mean tweets segment of the Jeremy Pruitt era. Those were always popular in the Butch Jones era. We'll go through some of your reactions to the game a little bit later in today's show. Let's dive right in. First segment of this broadcast brought to you by Bill Hotz and Associates. Over the next 5 weeks, there will be a lot of traffic in Knoxville and on those interstates. More traffic probably means more accidents. If you find yourself to be the victim in an accident caused by a careless driver, it'd be hard to be injured by a carless driver, but a careless driver, do the smart thing. Call Bill Hotz and Associates. They've been helping people in East Tennessee for more than 30 years. Bill Hotz and Associates. All right, I want to welcome in my associates for the first segment. VFL Brian Randolph, VFL Will Overstreet, Jimmy Himes, Josh Ward. We got the WNML guys down there. All right, thanks to everyone for being here. Last Sunday, Brian, you nailed it.
Oh, yeah.
We did a segment where we talked to Sterling, Will, and yourself. I said, what are the big concerns for next week? What must be fixed immediately? You said mentality. I looked at you squarely-eyed thinking, what are you talking about? You pointed out that you played on a 2011 team where you had some key guys quit against Kentucky. It snapped that streak. I thought, okay, well, maybe there is a danger in these guys quitting.
Oh, yeah.
I think you nailed it. I think a lot of guys quit yesterday.
Yeah, a lot of guys quit. And you mentioned my 2011 season. I personally feel like the offense quit, but yesterday I felt the whole team quit as a whole. When you give up 90% of your passes completed, you can't. That's hard to do in practice.
He only had 4 balls hit the turf all day.
That's crazy.
Out of 35 passes.
What was the drop?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but when you do that, and you made Vanderbilt like they're Alabama, so that's just not true. Vanderbilt's not as good as Alabama. They shouldn't have beat us that bad, and I refuse to believe for that. Sorry.
You also got out-toughed, which is, you could say, well, that's a product of not really caring or wanting to be there. They got pushed around all day. You're missing tackles. Abernathy gets pushed through the end zone. Just a bad day all around. Gentlemen, does anybody here want to argue the fact that there were some guys that quit on this team?
No, I don't think there's any doubt there were some guys that quit on this team. You hate to say it because there's also going to be some guys out there that played well, that were doing things. Kyle Phillips continued to like his play and his effort. So, saying they quit, you don't want to paint that broad brush against everybody.
That's right.
But there were several players on that field that if you watched their effort level, that you watched, if a guy broke a tackle, how they were jogging over there and they weren't pursuing the football, they weren't doing their job, and that they were getting pushed around and they didn't look like they cared after a while, especially in that second half when you go down by 2 touchdowns. You really saw the quit in several positions.
John, one of the things that happened on Friday, there was a friend of mine that's close to the program that told me that he felt like Tennessee would not play well, and he said that there are a number of players on that team that don't want to go through 2 or 3 more practices under Pruitt, that don't necessarily care about going to a bowl game. I do think there were some that didn't care, that didn't give much effort, and that's a shame because there were some Kyle Phillips out there. There were a number of guys that did play hard, but there weren't enough.
You had some guys after the game. Kyle Phillips and Shy Tuttle both made comments about guys wanting to play, whether they're talking about every game or whether they're talking specifically about yesterday. That's up to the listener, but they're throwing it out there that some guys aren't really in it all the way. And Josh, you had a walk-on freshman last night go on Twitter and vow that we won't have quitters anymore. There's no debate. You had guys that mailed it in.
Yeah, Niles Gaddy, freshman walk-on, starting today, so that's maybe a good sign that the cancer and the quitting, it's going to be moved out of the locker room. The problem is you need a lot of that locker room to come back and help you next season. So, I mean, that just tells you there is a long way to go. It's a reminder, I guess, that there's a long way to go. Vanderbilt's running up the score on Tennessee at the end of the game. They're throwing on Tennessee to put more points on the board to make it look worse for Tennessee. And that has to come back to effort and want to. Clearly, Vanderbilt wanted it more than Tennessee.
3 straight losses to Vandy for the first time since the 1920s. You couldn't have watched that the last time on TV because there was no TV in the 1920s. That's how long ago that was. You've lost 5 of 7 to Vanderbilt. You've lost 6 of the last 14. For a decade and a half, you've basically been equal with Vanderbilt. And for the last 7 years, you've been their little brother. This one yesterday, though, everybody knows the history. They know what's on the line, bowl game. Who do you put this on? Players quitting. At some point, a coach can't get inside their body and make a play. On the other hand, you're the one making $4 million a year to motivate these guys and get through to them. If you're divvying out the blame pie, what's the percentage share we got here? Who gets what?
I give 80% to the player themselves because I looked at it as not the job of the coach to get me mentally ready to play a ball game. That's my job. It's them to get me the right call. It's them to give me what does this other team do? How do I prepare for that game? But at the end of the day, I'm the guy that's got to put it out there and put it on the line. Now, you can have coaches that take away from that, distract you, do other things, but I've got to get ready for the game in my head, and not anybody else can do that.
I will also say, though, you were a highly productive player who wound up in the National Football League. I don't know that all players on the team, there may be guys on there who don't have the NFL in their motor, if you will, don't have that future, that need a little bit more motivation. But all right, 80-20, you go it on the players. What about you?
I'm about to go 50-50. You can't get away from the players. You can't make them want to play. But the coaches are getting the big bucks. You got to get in your player's head, give them enough incentive to want to play and want to go to a bowl game. When you're not having a great year and you go to not such a high prestigious bowl, it can be the worst job in America. And I feel like the coaches got to do something, maybe emphasize a ring or bowl gifts or put the best players that want to play. I don't know. You got to get the guys ready to go.
Guys, do you put this on coaches' players?
I put it on 80-20 players because it's kind of what Brian said. Which one are you going to touch? Is it the bowl ring? Is it the going to Memphis? Whatever it is, I think you can throw all that out there and it still doesn't motivate them enough to where they will play hard. And I think that's kind of what happened. So I put most of it, a coach can do as much motivating as he wants. If a player doesn't respond, that to me is on the player, not the coach. So I'm 80-20 on the player.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I fall somewhere in between those numbers. One issue that I think is obviously there. Do you have player structure to say, hey, this is what we have to do. We can't let another loss to Vanderbilt happen. Jeremy Pruitt said, I'm the leader of this program, right? He got a lot of the credit after wins against Auburn and Kentucky. There's got to be some responsibility after that against Vanderbilt.
Okay. Good deal. We got a lot to go today. We got a big show. Up next, a change at offensive coordinator. That was the rumor/report last night. We'll discuss could there be coaching changes on this staff. Also, as I mentioned earlier, your first mean tweet segment of the Jeremy Pruitt era. It's all you. I'm just the conduit. Come on back on the Sports Source.